It's the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast, episode 18. COVID disrupted many of our regular routines, some of which have not recovered. In particular, if you work from home, you may notice that seeing the same people every day and working in the same space is quite convenient, but it's also predictable in a bad way. Many of us have lost a certain thrill that comes from being in close proximity to others and the surprises which go with it. They're not there to invite us out as often. We don't meet up as frequently as we did with people outside of Zoom, that is. In a way, we don't have as many new things to look forward to. Not surprisingly, this has an impact on our daily happiness. Having something, anything, to look forward to has an impact on our well being and might say our daily joy or daily dose of joy. Is there a sustainable solution to this particular dilemma? Join me in a conversation with Laura Vanderkam as we explore this issue. Welcome to the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast. And welcome back. And here we are with a special guest, Laura Vanderkam, as you can see. But before I introduce Laura, I want to do a couple of things. The first is to tell you that this is a very different type of podcast where we're not just interviewing Laura, we're actually going to be solving a problem that we think many people have had and faced during COVID. And as you heard from the opening remarks, it's a problem that is pretty difficult to solve. So we're going to be agitating the problem from every angle that we can think of and then solving it, particularly using some of the ideas from Laura's book. And the third part, we'll talk about some implementation. And again, just before I introduce Laura, let me tell you a quick story. Chin Soon has just been laid off. Her husband is as scared as she is because his part time income can't support the both of them and their Manhattan lifestyles. She knows she needs to cut back on her spending, but she remembers what happened during COVID when neither of them could leave their apartment. They got the worst case of cabin fever and ended up hating the work from home experience. In fact, they were so eager to go out that they caught the disease right after the restrictions were lifted. Well, I have a witness. This time around, she's a bit more savvy. She wants to ensure they don't end up being depressed and scared at home, limiting their lives and ending up sad, morose. But they can't spend any money to take a vacation, which is what everybody is doing. It's the accepted solution, right? If she can't pursue this remedy, well, what else is there? So I want to introduce you to our special guest today, Laura Vanderkam. She's the author of several time management and productivity books, including the forthcoming Tranquility by Tuesday, 9 Ways to Calm the Chaos and Make Time for What Matters, and several other books, but I want to highlight that one. Her work has appeared in New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, and Fortune. And she also hosts a podcast before breakfast and is the co host of a podcast called Best of Both Worlds. She lives outside of Philadelphia with her husband and 5 children. And she blogs at lauravanderkam.com. Laura, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great. So everyday happiness has become a challenge for some, like Chin Soon, as I mentioned. What do you make of this challenge of everyday happiness? Is it real or is it something that we're just all imagining?
Yeah, well, it can be hard to spend time in a way that makes us enjoy our lives. I think, productive, ambitious people, we get through our to do lists, we do the things that we have to do, but turning our mind a little bit toward the things that we want to do, toward things that we might genuinely be looking forward to, can be a little bit more challenging. And so, yeah, as you said, the default, people are like, well, I need a vacation, and maybe you do. But sometimes that's not in the cards for one reason or another, whether there's travel restrictions because of COVID, or if money is tight, or whatever other reason, we can't necessarily just throw money at the problem, or look at the entire universe of options. Then we have to be a little bit more creative. But I am thrilled with that question because I think there are a ton of things that Chinsoon and her husband can do to make sure that they are still enjoying life, even if they're feeling like it would be, maybe not so responsible to spend a great deal of money right now.
Right, right. Because we had this weird feeling like she had during COVID of kind of the days blending into each other. The kind of what day is it today? I don't know because all of the markers that told us what day it was, or kind of the being outside and watching, seeing what other people are doing, being on projects that had timelines that correlated with a calendar, all of that just sort of went away. And here we are looking at our screens in our bedrooms or spare bedroom, and every day is kind of like this molding it, just falling into the other, and they're all kind of, time is kind of like slipping away, and internally we're feeling kind of a level of, God, is this gonna end? Is this gonna, yeah, is that accurate?
Yeah. Well, it's true. And this happened a lot during COVID, but it happens in people's normal lives too. I mean, we can all become, into our routines, and our routines are good. I like routines. Routines make good choices automatic. But sometimes when we have too much of life being absolutely the same day to day, then nothing feels like it's ever changing. And our brains don't bother to remember the time, because what's the point? I mean, every day is like the other. Our brains aren't experiencing anything new that they're bothering to lay down new memories. But the good news is that you can take small steps to put things that are a little bit more novel or interesting, out of the ordinary, into your life. You don't have to do a ton of these things, but just doing a little bit of them can make you turn a week from like, oh, that week was just absolutely like every other week, to like, no, no, that was the week we did this. Or yeah, oh, that was the day I did this. And it's something that makes your brain remember it.
Right, right. Because when those things don't happen, it's almost as if we don't have anything nice to remember. Because when you travel, you have all these new things happening, right? And you come back and you can tell all these stories about, oh, look, here's a picture of the time where we went to the. So you have all these milestones which were all brand new and they were different, and it feels as if life crept back into your bones. But go back into the regular day, and COVID or not, it's really easy to fall into like a routine, especially if, I don't know if this is true, but I don't have kids, so I don't have the drama of kids getting into trouble and kids growing up and doing different things. It's just my wife and I, and we've been married for a long time, 19 years, 18 years, 17 years, a long time,
Something like that.
somewhere in there. And so things don't change all that much between us. So it's really easy. And I imagine, from what I hear, people who retire often have a similar challenge. They have an empty nest. So all that source of excitement and the source of change goes away, and they kind of get into this dull kind of stasis. Is that an accurate way of saying?
Yeah, that does happen. And time keeps passing no matter what you do. Right. And
Hmm.
so it becomes, you know, in order to change that dynamic, we have to actually think about how we would like to spend our time. And so anyone who finds themselves in that situation needs to start asking that question of like, well, what would I like to spend my time doing? And there may be constraints, right? There may be, travel constraints, there may be budgetary constraints, maybe, caregiving constraints if that's an issue for someone. But you can still start brainstorming ideas to this question. What answers do I have? Like, what would I like to do with my time? Of the whole universe of possibilities, let's just start listing some. And trying not to edit yourself too much either,
Right.
because you could always shoot something down, but just go ahead and put it on the list. You think about anything that might be feasible, because sometimes when you put something on a list, you start thinking of other things, right? And it's a question worth devoting some research time too. I mean, especially if somebody is retired or between jobs, they may have a little bit of extra time to put some thought into this, and start coming up with some ideas.
But it is kind of a non-routine behavior to do that though, because the routine is to sort of, the regular way to live life is to see what life gives you each day and to respond appropriately, right? And if you live or you work in an environment where people are doing interesting things, then you don't have to do very much, right? You could just kind of go with the flow and have exciting things happen around you and to you. And all you do is you say, sure, I'd like to go. Oh, no, I won't go. like to, and all you're doing is really being reactive. But until something like COVID comes, you wouldn't realize that that's what you were doing. You didn't think about your time because your time was occupied by some good stuff.
Yeah, we can become a bit lazy when stuff is just happening all around us and we don't have to think about the planning of it. And we can just sort of spend time instead of actively thinking about how we would like to choose to spend it. So that can totally happen. But yes, everyone had that experience then. If all of a sudden then the stimulus of the office is not there,
Right.
somebody's like, we should go to lunch, who's walking down the hall. Oh, a couple of
Right.
people are going to this new, Ethiopian place. Let's go there. And so you go,
Right.
okay, let's
Ooh,
go do that. Yeah,
Ethiopia.
that
What's
sounds
that?
great.
Oh,
Exciting. And
yeah.
obviously that does not happen when you are sitting in your house. But I guess
Right.
those of us who, work from home for a long time have gotten accustomed to developing that muscle of like, if you want to get out and go somewhere and do something, you can. Right? Like you can, I mean, now that COVID, the restrictions are not there as much. If you would like to get together with a group of people to go to that new Ethiopian restaurant, well, you've got your phones, you can text people, you can set a time, you can all go and meet, and you will have just as much fun. And it wasn't, it didn't happen sort of more spontaneously. And sometimes that can feel a little bit like, oh, well, it should have. But, it's
Right.
just a discipline like anything else, that if you want to see things to happen in your life, you can take the steps necessary to make them happen. And the payoff of them happening is pretty cool.
Right. I think what you're saying is that it's not for everyone. Is it a discipline they had before COVID? COVID waking them up to the fact that maybe for some who sort of had a realization is that, boy, if new things are to come into my life, I actually have to cause them to happen. I
Yeah.
can't exactly just sit back and just
Can't
wait
sit
for them
back
to
and
happen.
trust that the universe will come to your apartment. No, it's true.
Apparently
And
it doesn't.
it doesn't. No. And when I first started working from home, and it was like 20 years ago now. Like we're talking a
Hmm.
long time ago. I was living in New York City, and I had been working in a 9 to 5 sort of job, and then I wasn't, right? Like I was,
Right.
at my house, and I
Right.
did not have a family at that time. So, it was me and my roommate who worked crazy hours at a law firm. So, I wasn't seeing her either. And I had to realize, like, if I'm going to see another human being, like if I want other human beings to like notice my presence or care if I did anything or not, I'm going to have to get out and find them. And so at that time, I wound up joining 3 community choirs, right? So 3 nights a week, I would have to leave my apartment, go sing with a group of people somewhere, and then, come home. But it forced me to, first stop work. Like I couldn't just half work and half not work all night. I had to get dressed, and then leave my apartment and go talk to people. And so that was a really good thing for me. And so I remember one of the advice that I gave people during COVID, when they were working from home, and then, they kept working from home, but some of the restrictions started to go away. It's like, well, find some sort of commitment in your personal life that will get you out of the house. And not just like, oh, I'd like to do this at some point or another. We're talking about
Right.
things that you are going to do, because like at choir, my attendance was expected. Or if you play in a softball league, like they need a second baseman, so you should probably show up, and things
Right.
like that. And so then you do, even if you're tired, and even if it would be easier to kind of stay in your pajamas all day. So that's the kind of thing. And if we're talking about the person here who's you know not wanting to go back to that COVID place, of
Right.
feeling depressed and all that, doing something like joining a community choir, generally not expensive. Most places, there's just a small, fee, or if there's any.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Joining an athletic league, volunteering somewhere, obviously volunteering somewhere regularly, that's something you can potentially do when you are not in a full-time job. That would be, harder to do if you couldn't control, if you could leave the office at 6 p.m. So she can go do a regular Thursday night session at a food bank, for instance. She could commit to
Right.
that for the next few months while looking for a job.
Any sense of what the trigger might have been that got you to join the three community choirs? Because for someone who is kind of stuck, they they they, they may think they have to wait until they're almost on the verge of a nervous breakdown, and that's when I go join the three community choirs. But I suspect that that's not what triggered it for you. Do you have a sense, or can you remember what the trigger was, or what the moment? there an epiphany? Was there a did you look at yourself in the mirror one morning and said, "I'm not going down like that"? Was there anything?
Like I should take a shower at some point. Yes. You know.
I
Um,
didn't say it, but that's what I thought.
well, no, I think, I think a lot of these things wind up happening somewhat randomly, at least at the beginning. And so I think the first
Mhm.
choir, I'm, on various email lists, as you are, like you're on newsletter lists, you're
Okay.
whatever, you're on
Yeah.
college alumni lists. Somebody
Yeah.
mentions like there are auditions this week. And I sitting there in my apartment think, well, geez, I'm not doing anything. Let me
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Why not go audition? And if you sang in high school, usually you can carry a tune enough to make it into a average community choir. So you could go do something like that. And by the way, many choirs don't even have auditions, so people don't even need to worry about that part.
But could you
But
actually sing, or was this like you
yeah, no,
also
I like to
learned how
sing.
to
I mean,
sing?
I'm not
Okay.
going to be, no one's going to pay me for it, but it's I enjoy it. And so I went and auditioned, and they were a welcoming sort of choir, so I made it in. And they, I started going. I was like, this is pretty fun. Like it was fun to have this thing on Thursday night or whatever night their rehearsals happen to be. And I realized it started being this like tent post on my week, that like, oh yeah, now this is the thing I need to do on Thursday, and I'm kind of angling toward that, and I don't do other things on Thursday night because I'm expecting to be there. And I enjoyed it enough that when I started getting, once you're in the choral scene, you start getting, news about other choirs and such. I'm like, well, maybe I'd like one that did different sorts of music, like maybe one that did, bigger orchestral works. That might be fun. And so I found a choir that did that. And then I found one that was specifically oriented toward, young people. I was in my 20s at the time, so I joined one that
Okay.
was, just people in their 20s. And that's kind of how it happened, that you see something that seems fun. Like often you have things in your life that you've enjoyed doing. I mean, it
Yeah.
happened to be choir for me, but I've done other things. I like dancing, for instance, or painting or whatever. It could have been anything, right? That you are just on the lookout for things that answer that question of like, what would I genuinely look forward to? Like, what sounds fun? What would get me out of the house, have me talk to other people, give me some structure to my time? You try
Right.
stuff, you see how it goes. If you enjoy it, you see if you can do more of it. And that's basically how it works.
Right. Right. And at the same time, there's a there's a systematic way, because in a way, what I think your book answers is the question of, shouldn't there be a way for you to bring this happiness into your life as soon as you can detect that it's dipped? So that there's a system to this. This is not, the book doesn't say just randomly, follow whatever happens in your world. The book says, wake up. The book says, wake up to something, and waking up to this something and then following a systematic method is the way that you're saying that. So you're answering the question. There should be a way to go from being kind of stuck and not having anything to look forward to and kind of unhappy and kind of depressed, to engineering your life so that that goes away. And you found, and I know I'm jumping ahead into the solutions, but it might help our listeners as they think through, because they need not have had this terrible thing happen. They may catch it a lot earlier, that like, there's just a little bit of sameness, routineness, and boredom, and kind of lack of aliveness in my life. And maybe there's a systematic way for me to engineer in the kind of happiness that would make a difference. That this is kind of what I'm wondering, is where your solutions will take us. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so I mean, Tranquility by Tuesday is basically about 9 strategies that do help you make space for joy in your life, right? That will help you feel like life is less of a slog. They are all, time management ideas that are oriented toward helping you feel sort of more energetic, for starters,
Hmm.
so that you feel like you have the capacity to look at your time and think about what you want to do with it. Then help you figure out what you could do in your life in a good pace for putting new and sort of interesting, out of the ordinary, exciting things into your life. And then how to make sure that you are not spending all your time on things that, we all spend too much time on, but we probably don't wish to, right? That you can push a little bit more joy into your life by making some of the things that are less exciting take a little bit less time.
Right. So in that sense, it's not a time management book, it's a joy book.
Well, I mean, that's what it's all about, really. I mean, what's the point of managing our time well if it's not toward any useful end? The idea is that people should enjoy their time. And, we're talking about the person finding themselves newly unemployed, not wanting to spend money. That can be a very stressful time, right? Like there'd be a time that we could give in to these feelings of depression and like, what am I doing with my life? Who knows? I can't have any fun. Like, but it can also be an opportunity because, we're talking a productive, ambitious person. This person's going to be like fully employed more than they want to be, like within the next 6 to 12 months. Like that's
Hmm.
just the truth. I mean,
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
how it works for 99% of people. You'll be in
Hmm.
something else. You'll be as overcommitted as you were before in
Hmm.
6 to 12 months, right? So
Hmm.
once you know that about yourself, you can say, like, look, I've got this time and I can
Hmm.
truly enjoy myself during this time. I mean, maybe we don't want to go overboard on spending money, but I do have this time now that I can structure in the way I want. I can experience new things. I can experience all that the city has to offer.
Hmm.
And knowing that, we'll be back to the way things were soon enough. But for now, this is how I can orient myself.
Right. And in that sense, your book is a wake up call to not slip back into the routine of the 9 to 5 and the overcommitment that you were in before. COVID may have indicated to you something, but the truth is the seeds of the dilemma were there before. It's just that COVID made it worse. And
Hmm.
you're just are you kind of saying, listen, wake up to what your life could be, wake up to the level at which you have settled, so to speak, and wake up to, and here's a systematic way to, once you've awoken to, oh my God, I should do something about this, that here are actual practical steps that involve time management. Yes, it's time blocking. Yeah, there's technique involved in it, but it's not about the technique. It's about the original impact that you want to have on the quality of your day-to-day life.
Yeah, because I mean, we want ways to calm the chaos and make time for
Mhm.
what matters. We want to build things that are exciting into our lives, build things that we are genuinely looking forward to. And so, yeah, Tranquility by Tuesday offers a framework for how to do just that.
Great, great. Well, let's look at one of the specific recommendations. This is the one that you made at the task management and time blocking summit back in March, and it's one that my wife and I heard together. We were both listening, and we actually have one coming up. One of these. Let's start with the big adventure. We have a big adventure coming up, and it's all because of Laura. But
Oh,
Laura, can
great.
you take us through what a big adventure is?
Yeah, so one of the Tranquility by Tuesday rules is to have one big adventure and one little adventure each week. So, two things that are out of the ordinary, novel, that will be memorable, right? That your brain will bother remembering. And so, I say big adventure. I mean, you may be about to tell me about some fabulous trip you guys
It's
are
kind of
about
a
to take,
mega
which is
adventure.
awesome. Yeah, yeah. But for most people, like by big adventure, I mean 3 to 4 hours, right? Something that you
Right,
could do on half a weekend day. Okay, that would
right,
qualify as a big adventure. And then a little adventure is something that could take, an hour, maybe even less. Something you could do on a weekday lunch, like a weekday evening, just as long as it's memorable, out of the ordinary. And the idea of pacing yourself, doing one big adventure, one little adventure, is it's enough to make time feel different, enough to make time feel special, like your brain is bothering to remember any of it. But it's also not enough to exhaust or bankrupt anyone, right? Like we're not going to all
right,
take 4-day weekends every week and go somewhere.
right,
It would be great, but it's not going to happen.
right,
But we could take 4 hours and
right,
go, bike ride somewhere cool and,
right,
then bike ride back, right? Or
right,
take 4 hours to go see a show and get tickets to a show, or,
right,
4 hours to go mini golfing or whatever it is that you like to do. But,
right.
something that would be fun, interesting, novel, out of the ordinary, memorable, do that once a week. Do a little adventure once a week, and you will find time feeling incredibly different.
Right, right. Okay, so I broke a rule. I did not. I meant a mega adventure, which is not in your book.
No,
I was thinking
I'm
of
all for
something
mega adventures too. I mean,
huge.
those are great.
But this one involves travel, so but that particular example I had in mind doesn't apply. But we have started to create these big adventures on a Saturday morning where we would normally walk in the neighborhood, and our big adventure is to jump in the car, drive somewhere different or new or that we haven't been to in years or because of COVID, park the car and then do our walk from about 5:30 in the morning. It takes us a couple of hours and then takes time to go visit somebody and then come back. And sure enough, just like you said, it gives us something to look forward to each week. And it almost makes me think that if you're somebody who time blocks, then what you should do is you could do is actually start off with a blank calendar and program in your big adventures and your small adventures first before sleep, before lunch, before work, before anything else, because that would change the quality of your time blocking, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to probably not block in your sleep. I mean, I don't know. I'm sleep's pretty fundamental, so you should probably make sure you got space for that. But you know, maybe it would be maybe one particular big adventure might be worth waking up a little bit early for, or you know, staying up a little late for some night or another. But yeah, no,
Mhm.
that's wonderful. That is exactly what I mean. And adventure is it's more a state of mind than an objective measurement, right? So just because you're not getting on a plane somewhere doesn't mean it isn't a big adventure. It's as long
Right.
as you find it interesting and that you are looking forward to it and that you remember it, right? Those are basically the criteria.
Tell me those three again.
Well, it's that you are, well, what did I say? If you find it interesting, you're looking forward to it and that you remember it. Yeah, those three.
I've written that down when you gave the first thought.
So maybe I need to write that down too. I'm not sure I'll remember that. I don't
That's
think
what
that's
it's
a
in your
framework
book.
that's actually in the book, but those are
Great.
the sorts of words that I use, right? That things that are memorable, things that are novel, things that are
Interesting,
intense in some
memorable.
way or another. You know, any of those things allow our brains to hold on to something. I mean, that's why we remember vacations, right? But this is about taking
Right.
that mindset of
Interesting.
why do we remember vacations and putting it more into our everyday lives.
Right, right, right. And guys, if you're listening and wondering, okay, where Laura probably made up this stuff one night when she was sleeping. No, Laura, tell us about the primary research you did to arrive at these conclusions. That it's not just something you read in a horoscope somewhere. Please
Yeah. Well, it
inform
could
our
be. I mean,
audience.
yeah, I know. I mean, well, that's self-help for you. But so I mean, I've done thousands of time makeovers over the years, had many people share their schedules with me, and I realized at some point that I was giving a lot of the same advice. Even people in very different stages of life, people in different professions, a lot of the time management advice was at least somewhat similar. And so I started, honing this down to kind of 9 things I say a lot. Like as I look at somebody's schedule and analyze like what would make it better, it's often one of these 9 things that would make it better. And so I came up with 9 time management rules and then I decided to test them out systematically. And so I had 150 people try out the 9 rules. So they would learn one rule a week. They would, learn it. They would answer questions about how they plan to implement it in their lives. I would check back a week later to see how things went. I was measuring them on various dimensions through the course of these 9 weeks. And I found that people who did, attempt to follow these rules over the course of 9 weeks did see their time satisfaction levels rise to a very significant degree. So that was exciting to see. People felt better about their leisure time. People felt like they were making more progress on both their professional goals and their personal goals. People felt like they were wasting significantly less time on things that weren't important to them.
Right. So guys, you hear that? There was 150 guinea pigs before us, for any of us. This is empirical research. This is not stuff that she just made up and said, "Oh well, let me put together a book and see if I can make some sales." This is from measured research by someone who is committed to doing the hard work that many of us don't want to do. We just want to write the book and have the pithy sayings and come up with the memes and sell, sell, sell. So we appreciate the work that you put into this, Laura, because having tested your big adventure and small adventure, I can see that it's almost like an extreme form of self-care. It's
Yeah.
weird.
And having the rule is what nudges us to do it. I mean, I know some people are listening. The subtitle of Tranquility by Tuesday is 9 ways to calm the chaos and make time for what matters. And I present these as 9 rules. And I know not everyone likes the idea of rules. So, if you don't like the word rules, just think of them as strategies, suggestions, ideas you might consider trying out. But I did find that when people followed these rules, strategies, suggestions, ideas you might try out, their life felt different. right? Like these are things that do have an impact. And that's, it's important to me that if I am presenting ideas to people, that I am not just making it up, right? That there is something behind it. And so I was very thrilled to see that people did report feeling better about their time. And we got all sorts of quotes and anecdotes from people to that effect, which is what I put in the book as well.
Hmm. I also noticed that you made mention of keeping a running list of adventures. So you always have like a backlog. Is
Yes.
Can people run
Well,
out of ideas, of good ideas, and end up with, you know,
yeah, no, I mean, it can be hard
way
to
too
come up
much
with
to use?
adventures, especially, if money is tight or you have other constraints for one reason or another. But it's partly about being in the mindset that you are looking for adventures. Like, I need to find two a week. So let me start making long lists of them. Let me start
Uh,
getting on
yeah,
the email lists for all the local institutions, right? Like, wherever
right.
you are, there are libraries, there are museums, there are, maybe arts groups, there are community groups. Get on those email lists, right? Because then they'll start telling you about, oh, like the library system, the branch I don't go to very often, but they have a new art exhibit. And you're like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. I'll stop by on my lunch break. Now you've had your little adventure for the week, right? That's how you start to see these things. You can be a tourist in your own town. There's probably some place that visitors are told to go. You can try those places out. Like you and your wife do, you can change your routines slightly so that your routines are a little bit different and memorable and novel. So if you normally walk a certain place, you could walk somewhere different. You could walk with a different person. You could, take a different exercise class, go run on a trail if you normally run on your treadmill. All of these are things that you can do to change things up just a little bit.
Yeah, there's something weird about even the walks that my wife and I take that I can't explain to you, but I bet you found it true in your research, is that these seemingly insignificant tweaks, like deciding to walk somewhere different that you haven't been for a while, make a huge difference. Now, I cannot explain to you why walking somewhere that I walked before 2 years ago, why is it so different? Why does it add so much joy? It
I
has
think
an
it's just,
outsized proportionate effect given the
yeah.
amount of energy it takes to input. It's like this should be working this well, but it's a lot of joy. How
But it
come?
does. Well, I'm glad to hear that you found it did. No, it's just that when things are new and interesting, it wakes us up to life to a surprising degree. And we start to see how similar days could be, like when we don't experience that. But just anything new and different and interesting wakes us up to the wonders of the world around us.
Huh. So we're not as boring as we think is
We're
basically
not,
what.
we don't, life doesn't need to be as boring as we sometimes make it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. By the way, I'm now seeing a new role for social media like Facebook, because through Facebook, I have discovered other big adventures that people have had. They don't call them that, but they say I went here and I did this, and I'm like, well, crap, I could go there and do that. That's not. I could do that to my wife and I on our Saturday morning walks or on a different kind of evening. Huh. You get ideas because you know what, I'm kind of open to finding big adventures and trying to make them real. And we skipped our big adventure last week, and it was like, ooh, we were
Oh,
working, we were doing a
no.
conference, and we didn't go walking, and it really was like, oh,
Yeah,
because it's kind of like become this special,
it's your thing.
yeah, special investment. This little injection of joy. And you know what I appreciate is that you did the research to discover this for us.
Yeah. Well,
So,
good.
on behalf of our listeners, I want to, and I thanked you at the conference, but I want to thank you again. It's it's so easy to skip over that part, which is like the hard part, to come up with real findings that may not seem to make sense logically, or it's hard to explain to someone why that's such a big deal, but it works anyway. Who
Excellent.
cares?
Excellent.
As long as it works, it's something to kind of, the sort of routine of finding the big adventure and putting it in our life
Yeah.
has become something that is now always going to be there. Last thing before we wrap up is that in the article that you sent me, you mentioned doing something whimsical. Is that something in your book as well, or was that only for the article? And can you say more about that?
Yeah. So when this particular rule in Tranquility by Tuesday, it's rule number 6 to do one big adventure and one little adventure. And then as part of the book, I tacked on a bonus strategy to every chapter. Like, so something related that you could try, like once you've made the primary strategy a habit. So once you're in, the habit of doing one big adventure, one little adventure, a third thing you can do is just do something whimsical in the course of your week. Add whimsy to your week somehow. And, it can be anything, right? It can be having breakfast for dinner or, making yourself pumpkin pancakes for breakfast to celebrate the start of fall. It can be, drawing a cool picture on your driveway with chalk or blowing bubbles. Whimsy is anything that's kind of fun and silly. So think about how you can do just something fun and silly in a moment in your life in the course of the week. And what it is it's just making even smaller than a big adventure or a little adventure. It's just one more thing to make life seem a little bit different, a little bit novel, a little bit worth remembering.
For some reason, this one sounds harder than the others.
Well, whimsy is you got to think about it, but there's always like lists online. Like go Google add whimsy and see what comes up. I mean, there's probably tons of stuff. Put garden gnomes outside your window. I don't know. You could do
I
something.
know me and my audience will probably have to go, okay, what's the definition of whimsical again?
I don't know. I don't do anything silly. No, well, yeah, exactly.
Oh boy. Laura, tell us about your book coming out in just a few weeks. Tell us how
October
to get
11th.
it. I know there's some bonuses involved.
Yeah.
With the website.
Yes. So if you pre-order Tranquility by Tuesday and go to my website, you can sign up for a bunch of pre-order bonuses. You can get an excerpt of the first chapter, so you can go ahead and start reading it. You get a scorecard, which you can start tracking your progress on the 9 time management rules, right? Which ones did you do each week? Which ones did you not? What happened? What worked? What didn't? People who pre-order are getting early access to a series of videos I did called Tranquility by Tuesday in Real Life that has 4 of my readers/listeners talking about how individual rules made a big difference in their lives. So you can see, what happens to a busy person when she starts planning on Friday. What happens to a really busy person when she starts building in one big adventure and one little adventure. So those were really wonderful to put together. And so people get early access to those and to a webinar I'm doing shortly after lunch where we'll talk about the book and all the things that, we learned and things that questions people might have. So yeah, if you order before October 11th, you can sign up for all of those at my website, which is lauravanderkam.com.
Yeah. So from a certain point of view, you might say that it sounds a lot like time blocking, and to my ear as a time blocker, and given that this is the time blocking podcast, it is.
Yes,
but it's not.
Sure.
It's not the mechanics of time blocking in the way that we normally talk about. How do you use your calendar? How do you do this? How do you do that? It's a combination of a practical activity that produces an emotional benefit. And I guess we shouldn't be surprised because that's what time blocking is supposed to do. It's supposed to have this affect on us or effect on us, but it's supposed to affect our affect.
When we block in cool things, it has the obvious effect of making us feel better about our lives. I mean, that's pretty much how it works.
But it's not so obvious though, because I could do something cool that I think, like I watch a movie on Netflix. So that's my routine. That doesn't have the same effect as my big adventure.
It's true, but it's just not as interesting really in the grand scheme of things as living your own life. Yeah.
And I watch it on Netflix. I can't remember. Ask me what I've watched in the last month. I don't know. It's all went in one, came out the other. But for some reason, the walk that I took with my wife, we went up to the mountains where we used to live and visited the old neighbors and hung out with them for an hour. And that was like the high point for the last 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
I want you to explain these for me when you come back next time with your next book. Because I can't understand why it's so great.
You're spending time with really cool people too. I mean, that ups the enjoyment factor a lot. That if I were going to choose a 10th rule for Tranquility by Tuesday, it would be that people are a good use of time. So anything you can do with awesome people in your life is probably going to be worth the while.
But they weren't. Well, I don't want to say that. They could be listening. They were really cool. That's all I'll tell you. I agree. They were really cool. So I want to have you back, and when you write your next book, you can explain why these things have, so surprising results, such a surprise effect on our lives. So Laura Vanderkam, thanks for joining us here on the Task Management and Time Blocking podcast. It's been great having you. Good luck with the book, and we look forward to dropping this episode and having it come out sometime around the I guess the time zone when the book is just released to the public and all the excitement is happening. And congratulations, and once again, thanks for putting in some heavy lifting to produce the results that you could share with us today.
Well, thank you so much. It means a lot to me, and I'm glad you find some of these rules useful yourself.
Me too. Take care. All the best.
All the best.
Oh, I didn't mean to sign off from the podcast completely because listening, there's a few other recommendations I have coming up after the break, and I'm gonna let you in onto the next episode of the podcast. I'll give you a little preview, so keep listening. Bye, Laura.
Bye.
Like everyone else who does knowledge work, you receive a lot of emails, more than you'd like. You've harbored dreams of a world in which you could escape this hated chore. But over here in reality, there seems to be no way to alleviate the pain, or is there? Some people suggest that you simply ignore most of your email. Others say that you need to empty your inbox and even keep it that way all the time. In practice, most people spend more mornings, nights, and weekends catching up on email than they care to admit. During the day, they prefer to do what they call real work, not the fake work of reading and replying to email. And if you want to leave a comment about this episode or any aspect of the work that we're doing here at the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast, you can go over to www.replytofrancis.info and send me either a message by text or send me a voice message, a voice note. And as you probably know, we have a couple of places that you can interact with other people, talk about this episode. One is at the community, mightytaskers.scheduleu.org, and you'll see the link in the show notes. And the other, of course, is our upcoming Task Management and Time Blocking Summit coming up in March. Two outstanding opportunities to interact with other people about the ideas that you've heard on this podcast or any of our episodes that are coming up. And if you'd like to support the work we're doing, I invite you to click on the Patreon link below to make a donation. And please don't forget to like our show and recommend it to others on iTunes, Stitcher, Google, or whatever podcast app or service you're using. This is Francis Wade. I'm signing out. I hope to see you on a future episode. And until then, take care and all the best. See you later.